Hello, all performers. Without a doubt, probably the biggest question that I get asked when I show up to speak is how do I get just a little bit more motivated? Or if it's a leadership or a managerial team, how do I better motivate my team or motivate the people that are in my organization or the people that follow me? Motivation is everywhere. Now, we could talk probably for the rest of the day until the cows come home about the difference between motivation and discipline, and at the end of the day, which one is really most important. But motivation is everywhere. And a lot of times people want and seek and think they need more motivation. And it's worthwhile for us to actually unpack how we can do that. Because I feel like just sitting there and saying, well, I need more motivation, that's to call it what it is. That's pretty amateur. That's pretty entry level because we have to actually be able to peel that back a little bit and look at the different components of motivation that go into anything that we're looking to do, whether it's personal, professional, athletic, or otherwise. So, to start unpacking this and to really look at it, motivation has three different components, and it's what I call the motivational API. Now, if you're an IT person, API in this case does not stand for, I think it's Application Programming Interface is the term. Motivation API in this case actually stands for activation, persistence, and intensity. Those are the three different components that go into motivation. And the simple way for you to remember it, other than API, is look at it in terms of if I'm seeking more motivation for some area in my life, am I looking at it in regards to starting, sustaining, or strengthening? Because starting is activation, sustaining is persistence, strengthening is intensity. Now, there are many different ways, and there's certainly some crossover between strategies that we can use to be able to tap into each of these different things. But we have to look at them and we have to say, if I've been searching for more motivation for something in my life, or if there's something that I've always wanted to do or wanted to help a team member do, and they haven't been able to do it, well, where are they struggling? Are they struggling to start? Are they struggling to sustain? Or are they struggling to, struggling to strengthen? Because how we can address those is a little bit different. So I'll give you one strategy for each of these three things. So this podcast and this video doesn't go all day. So we can look at it and we can better tap into in whatever area we're struggling. How can we do a little bit better job of getting motivated, staying motivated, and strengthening our motivation? So first up, activation or starting something. Now, a lot of times if we look at the psychology of if we're just struggling to start, like, oh, I know I want to start this workout program because I want to get healthier, but it's just hard for me to engage with that. It's just hard for me to get going with what I'm doing. Well, a lot of times the psychology that keeps us or that holds us down from actually starting something is the enormity of the task and kind of the overwhelm that comes with it. Like, it just seems like there's so much. Oh, I know I'm supposed to work out for an hour. It just seems like a ton. Or I know I'm supposed to clean my house and that's going to take many hours. It just seems overwhelming. Or I'm supposed to make 40 sales calls. It just seems like a lot. Knowing that part of it, what we psychologically have to convince ourselves to do is make it easy to start and psychologically convince ourselves that if we can just get engaged and if we can shrink it down to just a very small one bite of that huge elephant and just get going in that direction, it's what we call micro commitments. But it's basically if we take one simple, small, decided action in a given direction, we're more likely to continue in that course of direction and continue kind of in that path of action. And one of the examples that I oftentimes give is actually, if you haven't heard of the Stanford researcher BJ Fogg, it's BJ Fogg with Fogg, two G's. His whole thing is tiny habits. He's very much a James Clear type, and he has a TED Talk out there that you can Google and you can actually watch. But he talks about the psychology of just flossing one tooth. And kind of the analogy behind that, where if it seems really overwhelming for you to think of flossing the entire mouth, can you just convince yourself that I don't need to worry about the entire mouth right now? I just need to start. I just need to focus on flossing one tooth. Knowing that once you've flossed one tooth, you're more likely to continue down that course or that path of action, and you're more likely to probably floss the entire mouth. And I think we can apply that to anything that we do in life, whether it's personal, professional, athletic, or otherwise. Just make it easy to start and just focus on that small part of engaging with whatever behavior you want to do. And more than likely, you're going to see that transfer and carry over into the next part of the persistence, which is to sustain. Now, the sustaining part is basically what makes it difficult to sustain is it's basically, okay, if I'm trying to get healthy and I'm trying to start a running program, get out for runs. Okay, well, the sustaining part comes from what do I do when I'm tired or I get to a hill or the weather turns bad? Do I quit and do I go back home, or am I able to persevere and sustain through adverse conditions and through obstacles, barriers, etc.? So actually a couple of things that you can do on this. First, I would go back to the beginning part of it where you actually check your expectations going in. Because one of the strategies that I would always use for people, and that I still use before I'm going into any race, whether it's a half marathon, bike race, or anything else, I always envision in my mind that it's going to be one of the hardest things I've ever done. That it's going to be extremely difficult and extremely taxing. But I also believe deep down that I have the goods and I have the confidence and I have the ability to be able to get through those tough times. And I've found that this is a really crucial strategy for people, because if you go into it just thinking something is going to be easy, and now all of a sudden you get hit with whatever the adverse conditions are, the equivalent of hitting a hill, getting tired, having the weather turn bad, whatever the equivalent of that is, if you go into something feeling like, well, I really hope it's just going to be smooth sailing, or I think this is going to be easy, and you get hit with that, now all of a sudden you don't know how to respond. You don't know what to do about that, and you can't put that genie back in the bottle again. Like, you have to go into it thinking, I'm going to go through some points in time where this is going to feel difficult, where this is going to feel challenging, but I have the ability to get through it. You have to go in with that expectation. I think that affects your ability to be persistent, your ability to sustain greatly. Above and beyond this, we also have to look at bundling the 1-2 punch of delayed gratification as well as instant gratification. Now, I'm not going to go deep into either of these things, but basically delayed gratification is doing something or not doing something now, knowing that it'll pay off later on or pay off down the road. One of the best ways to foster our ability to delay gratification is to remind ourselves of the importance or the meaning or the value behind what we're doing. If you can reinforce that when you're in the thick of adverse conditions, you're more than likely to sustain. But we also need to bundle that with the 1-2 or the 2 part of the 1-2 punch, which is the actual instant gratification as well, which is a part that a lot of people don't think about. They just think about doing something or not doing something now and knowing it'll pay off down the road. But the instant gratification part is looking at ways that we can actually make it a little bit more enjoyable to be doing what we're doing, whether it's personal, professional, or athletic. Because if we can find just a little bit more joy, a little bit more enjoyment and fulfillment with what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, now when times get hard, we're more than likely to stay persistent. We're more than likely to sustain, because we're actually getting an immediate benefit because we find it a little bit more enjoyable. And when we couple that with the part of knowing how important and meaningful and worthwhile it is, now we got a pretty good 1-2 punch for being able to stay persistent, being able to sustain. Last but certainly not least, the I in the API is the intensity, or is the how do I strengthen part. And I would say for most of the people, that I've heard talk about motivation, usually when they refer to, well, I just need to get a little bit more motivated, they're usually talking about the intensity, which is just basically, okay, if I'm running, I just need to run faster than I am. Like, I just need to go faster. I need to do more. I need to be more motivated. I need to strengthen what I'm doing. Well, the best way that you can do this, and this will certainly land with those of you out there that are competitive people, but everything that we know about social psychology and accountability and everything else, one of the best ways that we can actually strengthen what we're doing or increase the intensity of our motivation is to feel like we're playing a winnable game. And play a winnable game, if not against ourselves, against others. So it's the psychology of, I have a little bit of a pacer, or I have something that's pulling me up that I know I'm being evaluated against, that's going to make me run a little bit faster or do a little bit more or get to that next rung on the ladder, because I can see this person that's just a little bit past me, and they're in turn pulling my performance up for what I'm doing. Everything we know about social psychology will validate that we will always do more and give more and perform at a higher level when we know we're being measured and accountable socially and other people are watching us and evaluating us, versus if we're just doing it on our own. So when I say playing a winnable game, it's critically important to know what that winnable game actually looks like. Like, if I'm running on a treadmill, and let's say that I'm running at 7 miles an hour, and there's a person next to me that's running at 7.2 miles an hour. All right, well, if someone says you just need to strengthen your motivation a little bit, can you just incrementally step that up to be able to get to 7.2 miles an hour? Yeah, I can probably do that, because that's a winnable game, and that's an incremental change and something that I feel like I can do. Now, if you have a Kenyan marathoner running next to me that's running along at 12 miles an hour and I'm running at 7, and you say, hey, you need to strengthen your motivation and catch up to this person, where I have no chance at being able to do that, 99.9% of people are going to shut down, and they're not actually going to strengthen their intensity as far as their motivation goes. So in regards to strengthening, we have to look at, am I being evaluated for doing something? Am I being measured against something? Who will socially be holding me accountable for doing this? And what does that ultimately look like? Because if we can frame that in a way that you're playing a winnable game, I promise that's going to help probably more than anything else for you to be able to run, or whatever the metaphorical equivalent of that is, just a little bit faster than you're doing it right now. So to recap these 3 things, again, motivational API goes activation, persistence, intensity, or just remember the alliteration of start, sustain, and strengthen. Don't do what everybody else out there does, which is just use the blanket term of, I just need to be a little bit more motivated towards this thing. If you're ever struggling with motivation, which you will do, because I do it too, because we all do it. We're humans, we're imperfect creatures, right? If you're ever struggling with motivation in a given area, ask yourself that question. Am I struggling to start? Am I struggling to sustain? Or am I struggling to strengthen? And then based on whatever area you find that you need to enhance that motivation a little bit more, now you can be more targeted with how you're looking at that and what you're intentionally doing to be able to strengthen that specific component of motivation, whether it's strengthen, sustain, or start. And I promise you're going to be better off in every single thing that you do if you're able to look at it through that lens. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching this. Keep outperforming. And as always, wishing you the best of health, happiness, and high performance. Have a great day.